I suppose from an early childhood, I've always seen photographs of the white salt and these land speed record breakers, and it's always sort of a little bit of a hero sort of image to me. And I think having a go with something that is not normally associated with land speed vehicles is VWs, air-cooled VWs in that aspect. And we decided that as a team, the Rattmuller team, we'd field 2 cars this year, and let's go down there and have a great time. And that was the aim. But what we came back with was a couple of records. Billy from the USA was the person who has compiled most of the history of land speed records in 36 horsepower motors. What he's kindly done and put effort to is trying to reignite the challenge, and successfully doing that. We are now having vehicles from different parts of the world competing on a similar guidelines. From my perspective, stick it up the Americans, because nothing better than Aussies doing something better than the Americans could do.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The choice of car, the 56 Oval, was an Australian built car here in Australia, in Melbourne. It was a CKD vehicle. What we did to comply with the Dry Lakes Racing Australia, the DLRA, we had to have a roll cage fitted and perform a few modifications which added a little bit of weight to the World Challenge. What we were able to do was remove a bit of the interior to compensate for the extra weight that we've put in. The first engine choice we had was the standard 36 horsepower, but somewhere in the vaults of my garage we had an SP 1300 Acrasa. Now, this motor was a special built engine in the 50s from Oettinger, and it produced around about 48 horsepower. The gear was a totally different build. It comprised of using a Karmann gear convertible that was purchased some time ago in the States cheaply and sat dormant, looking for a new life. Well, that happened to be the Salt. We looked at the aerodynamics of this car and decided it's a very pretty car. We could lower it quite successfully, and we could cut through the wind and have that real open sports car feel. Being a convertible, we went with the aluminium tonneau, aluminium dash, aluminium steering wheel, that real sort of boy racer feel. We used old school 356 Porsche wheels to give it that really early look, and we decided to paint this car orange. Again, a contrast on the white Salt. The engine choice on the gear was interesting. We had bittersweet success in building this vehicle. We actually started to use an Acrasa 2.2 litre engine, and 3 days before we left, it decided to break a crankshaft. We had a 3-day build of producing a 2332cc engine, which has approximately about 160 horsepower. We did this with using CB Performance products from the US, some 51.5 IDA Webers, some big heads, a 84mm stroke crank, Porsche rods, and some JE pistons. The vehicle wasn't tested. It was rolled from the workshop onto the car trailer and out to the big white dyno. That was our test track, the Salt. One of the most important aspects of these builds is how relatively standard these vehicles really are. We used a lot of OE, original equipment parts in the build. The Karmann gear is absolutely standard as far as the running gear is concerned, except for the engine. The transmission, the front suspension, the brakes are all absolutely stock standard. The journey to the Salt, 3,600 kilometres of driving. What we did, we basically had a good team with us. The guys all helped, all pulled their weight. We're all excited.
So Steve, are you ready for a big one, mate?
I'm thirsty, so is the car.
Let's set this to
turn left. Round the roundabout.
20 hours,
Exit.
1,609 Ks.
Rollin', 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 rawhide.
We took 3 VW transporters, T5s, turbo diesels, and we put out 2 tow vehicles and a support vehicle. This week it's just under a quarter, so we'll make that other town, maybe top it up. Adrian won't have to.
Hell-bent for leather, wishing my gal was by my side. All the things I'm missing, good victuals, love and kissing, are waiting at the end of my ride.
Move 'em on, hit 'em up, hit 'em up,
Move 'em on,
move 'em on,
hit 'em up,
rawhide, cut 'em out, ride 'em in,
cut 'em out,
cut 'em out, ride 'em in, raw.
We drove 20 hours to the Salt. We went through the hay plains. They had some very heavy rainfalls, and it was interesting to see the absolute starkness of the hay plains and seeing the water on the side just filling up and the rain. And we wondered what we were in for when we got to the Salt. We went through Renmark and through the top of through Victoria into South Australia to Port Pirie. The semi-arid areas of Australia was quite eye-opening. The feeling of vastness can only be relayed when you're actually travelling for 20 hours to get to a destination. We went through South Australia to Port Pirie, and from there we proceeded to a township called Iron Knob.
Here we are, mate, Iron Knob.
Yeah, do you want to have a look at it? Doesn't it work?
Nope, no water there. After 1,500 Ks, you decide to check the tyres?
No, I wasn't checking the tyres, warm my hands up.
Don't try and get out of the frame, I can follow you.
I was just warming my hands up.
Yeah. Nice and hot, is it? Been rubbing all the way.
Yeah, so I'm trying to wear them down a bit.
This was the last bastion, I suppose, of civilization before we headed out 180 kilometres of dirt road to Lake Gairdner. This really opened our eyes. We combated dust and mud because we had some very heavy rainfalls. And we were travelling with vehicles that we had made no provisions to protect. And we found out when we did pull up how much dirt, dust and crap filled our vehicles. The campsite was one of envy. We had so many people looking at seeing how we set ourselves up. We had 5 clipper buses, which were our headquarters, you could say. We had great undercover, we had a great camaraderie. The team had grown from about 10 to about 16 people in a very short period of time. And any other VW guys that had turned up just for the weekend sort of got sucked into the vortex of the team camp and decided to camp with us. That made it all the more enjoyable. Once we had established camp, one of the first things we really had to do was get our vehicles off the trailers, clean them and make them presentable. We did so, and we found out we had a few extra things we had to do. One of the omissions on my behalf was steel-stemmed valves in the rims. We had rubber. Fortunately, one of the clipper guys had truck valve stems, steel ones, which were quite long, and with the equipment they had on hand, we were able to change those so we could compete. Otherwise, we would have been told to go home. An 1,800 kilometre drive back home wouldn't have been favourable. The first impression of the Salt was like going to the beach. It looked to me as a vast inland sea. The closer you got, the closer you saw that it was just white. The ripples on the Salt looked like ripples in the ocean. Then looking on the horizon, you could get an idea of the 160 kilometre vastness. It's 160 k's by 100 kilometres across. There's 38 islands in the Salt. There, towards the edge of Lake Gairdner, there is this land speed record event. The first drive onto the Salt was somewhat strange. We didn't know what to expect. Once we've walked the Salt, we realised it was like concrete. It was a rough edge concrete. You couldn't nail a hammer into it, you couldn't drive a spike into it, you had to drill a hole to put anything into the Salt. That's how hard it is. So we made camp on our Salt bed, I suppose, and proceeded to have our VW community pretty well recognised. We had our We had our flag flying with pride, and all our team members were very, very pleased to be there. It looked like a circus that had just grown up out of the salt. Everyone with their different coloured vehicles, flags, everyone having their own sideshow there. And we felt we couldn't wait to get on there and be part of that. It was an adventure. We finally reached the destination. On the lake there are 3 tracks. You have a test track, you have a GPS track, and you have the long track. Now the test track is where you get out with your car and have a go and see if it's tuned correctly. Thankfully we had this. With the gear, we had no time to prepare our engine, so we'd use the test track to our best advantage. We tuned the gear with help from others to get the most we could out of that engine. Because of the infringing weather at Lake Gairdner, we had a very short time frame to actually compete, and we found that the lineup took most of the day to get one run. On this proviso, we decided to run the 36 horse stock standard down the GPS and try and break the 73.4 mile an hour record the Americans have set. We did this with driver Greg Mackey, one of the team members, who weighed in around about 66 kilos, quite light, and an age of around about getting close to 70 years of age.
Well, it's the first run in the Beetle. We're about to go on the test track. Mounted the camera up. Got Greg Mackey in the seat. So hopefully he doesn't crash it again. See what we can get it up to.
Will this be censored?
He took that car down at 75.1 miles an hour, and in our eyes we achieved a record braking run. The gear on the GPS track was very exciting. Our first run untuned, we achieved 114 miles an hour. At that point we felt we could get a lot more out of this vehicle, so we did a little bit of homework in the evening. We changed a few jets in our carburetors, changed the timing on the engine, and headed for the big track the next morning. The DLRA has some pretty strict regulations on how the car has to be built, how safe it has to be, and what you have to wear. Now in that gear at the start line, I had a 3-layer race suit, a special crash helmet, a sock over my head, arm restraints, gloves, race boots, strapped in with a 6-point racing harness. Having the sun beat down on your head, you tended to cook in that car, but all you could think about was my time's coming. My time's coming, so you're really focused. How are you going to achieve, what's it going to feel like doing this high speed? Once I got the wind up from the chief DLRA start man, that's when my heart really started to race. All I could remember was putting my foot flat to the floor in first gear. And obviously there's quite a bit of wheel spin occurred because the salt doesn't have that much traction. I slammed into second, realising a bit of a twitch on the rear end of the car as it sort of got traction, and then held it out in second, held it out in third, then finally into top gear. I had a run up of about 2 miles, and from the 2-mile marker there was another 250 yards and there's a timing marker. So all I could think of was holding it as hard as I could. I nearly felt like I could push my foot straight through the floorboard, pushing that accelerator down. If it could push any further, I would have done it. And as it culminated towards the end, all I could think of was holding the steering wheel. The grip was so intense that I was just focused, and the whiteness of it all just flashing by your eyes was just something that's hard to recount, to get that feeling of that adrenaline rush that you had. As soon as I went past the timing marker, it was off. The throttle was off. It was a cool down lap, and also for me, it was a cool down. I really had to get my senses back together and just bring the vehicle back in, knowing that the car sounded great, knowing it didn't come unstuck anywhere along the track, knowing that I've got a team that is waiting for me back at the pits with good news, I hope. So driving it back through and getting out of the car, and everyone, the great thing was no one told me as soon as I drove in what had happened.
How'd it feel? What'd you feel like you got, mate?
Maybe just a bit better than yesterday, I'm not sure.
Well done.
What happened? How'd we go? 127 mile an hour. 0.5. Bloke got my licence pass. 127 miles an hour.
You got to have a run in this.
Yeah. Hey?
You got to have a run in this. Congratulations, Steve. Well done.
Thank you. That's true. 127 mile an hour.
127.
Then all of a sudden, this whole thing, you've done it, you know, this 120, and everyone was wrapped. It was a great feeling, stepping out of that calm and gear, and really I just jumping in the air saying, great, we've achieved something, we've actually done it. All this work has come down to this point in time, and everyone felt the same. Too much salt in the diet can be dangerous, but not for this little duck. I think a lot more salt is on my plate.